personally, I lost my daughter in 2019 due to domestic violence. And it's something very difficult I've been dealing with on a day to day. So it takes a lot to kind of push my way through and to just make things happen. I'm raising two grandkids right now. Woo, all over again. And so when I thought about this particular show, I wanted to kind of come to you and say, how am I pushing through? And I'm sure I'm not by myself. There are a lot of people that's going through something. So I thought about this thing called the 3 R's. These are some principles I kind of use in my head when I deal with certain different situations. The first one is recognizing that there is an issue or a concern or something that you're dealing with. And once you recognize that there is something, whether that you may need to remove, reconstruct, or whatever, then you have to be willing to release it. And when you release it, that's not just letting it go. That means, okay, now recognizing it and deciding, okay, I have to do something to make movement with this one way or the other. And the last is removing it. And removing it doesn't always mean physical, because sometimes if it's our children or someone very near to us in a relationship with someone that we love, it's not that easy to just remove things physically. So sometimes you have to emotionally remove things or compartmentalize things on how you're going to allow, different things to kind of interact with your life and have an influence. So I came up with the 3 R's. That's just kind of what I do. And I spoke with these two gentlemen, and they were able to their stories sound so similar, different in what it was, but just the process, they've gone through different things. They have lived, if you know what I mean. They have lived, and they're willing to share some things with us and give us some great advice. I don't want to tell their story, but what I would like to do, you all, I came across this motivational speech by Denzel. Now, I haven't used my screen capture. This is my first time, so you guys are the first to see it. So I'm going to try and show you that this is the motivational speech that I thought was very, very interesting to me. And then I think you could probably benefit from. It's about 8 minutes long. I'm going to play that. And once I play that, I'm going to come back, and then you're going to hear from my guest. So hold on just one moment for me. And I don't have any rights to this. This is something that was recorded by Above Inspiration. It is on YouTube if you would like to go and find it and, listen to it again. But I do think it's something that will help you. So here we go. If you can't hear it or you're having a problem with the audio, please let me know.
Number one, put God first. Put God first in everything you do. Everything that you think you see in me, everything that I've accomplished, everything that you think I have, and I have a few things, everything that I have is by the grace of God. Understand that. It's a gift. 40 years ago, March 27th, 1975, it was 40 years ago, just this past March, I was flunking out of college. I had a 1.7 grade point average. I hope none of you can relate. I had a 1.7 grade point average. I was sitting in my mother's beauty shop. They still call it beauty shops now? What they call it now? Yeah, I was sitting in the beauty parlor. I was sitting in my mother's beauty parlor, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I see behind me this woman under the dryer. And every time she looked up, every time I looked up, she was looking at me, just looking me in the eye. And I didn't know who she was, and I said, she said, somebody give me a pen, give me a pencil, I have a prophecy. March 27, 1975, she said, boy, you are going to travel the world and speak to millions of people. Now, mind you, I was flunked out of college. I'm thinking about joining the army. I didn't know what I was going to do, and she's telling me I'm going to travel the world and speak to millions of people. Well, I have traveled the world, and I have spoke to millions of people. But that's not the most important thing, the success that I had. The most important thing is that what she taught me and what she told me that day has stayed with me since. I've been protected. I've been directed. I've been corrected. I've kept God in my life, and it's kept me humble. I didn't always stick with him, but he always stuck with me. So stick with him in everything you do. If you think you want to do what you think I've done, then do what I've done and stick with God. Number 2, fail big. That's right. Fail big. Today's the beginning of the rest of your life, and it can be very frightening. It's a new world out there. It's a mean world out there, and you only live once. So do what you feel passionate about. Take chances professionally. Don't be afraid to fail. There's an old IQ test, was 9 dots, and you had to draw 5 lines with a pencil within these 9 dots without lifting the pencil. The only way to do it was to go outside the box. So don't be afraid to go outside the box. Don't be afraid to think outside the box. Don't be afraid to fail big, to dream big. But remember, dreams without goals are just dreams, and they ultimately fuel disappointment. So have dreams, but have goals. Life goals, yearly goals, monthly goals, daily goals. I try to give myself a goal every day. Sometimes it's just to not curse somebody out. Simple goals, but have goals. And understand that to achieve these goals, you must apply discipline and consistency. In order to achieve your goals, you must apply discipline, which you've already done, and consistency every day, not just on Tuesday and miss a few days. You have to work at it every day. You have to plan every day. You've heard the saying, we don't plan to fail, we fail to plan. Hard work works. Working really hard is what successful people do. And in this text, tweet, twerk world that you've grown up in, remember, just because you're doing a lot more doesn't mean you're getting a lot more done.
Okay, so I just kind of went on in and decided to cut it. You can always go onto YouTube and take a listen to it in detail. It was a very profound speech to me. And so I just want to kind of get on into you all. I know that you all have lived, as I stated earlier, and you all have some great information you can share with our guests. And I would like to start with you first, Michael. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm Mike Bethune. I'm born in Paterson, New Jersey. Let's see, right after high school. Uh, First of all, I thought I was going to get scholarships because I was a really good athlete, and didn't get certain scholarships, and also going to high school because I was a good athlete. I can always make good grades, but I was also kind of a knucklehead too. I grew up in the housing projects in Paterson, New Jersey, also, and so the journey to high school, just knowing that they were going to let me get away with certain things because of the kind of athlete I was, I messed around and didn't do as well as I have the potential to do academically. And then my senior year, as a result, I ended up not getting certain scholarships because I had messed around in my earlier years. And so a little bit rejected, and I opted for the military. My goal was to go into the military in a couple years and, grow up, become a man, put money away, and eventually get out and, make my decisions about what direction I really want to go in life. But as I knew signing on the dotted line that combat and that kind of situation could come with it. So I was deployed. I was deployed to the border of Central America. There was a conflict going on there. It was more covert than anything. But I was in that hostile environment, life-threatening environment for 6 months, and I came back. Minor physical scars, but just major psychological scarring because of just the impact of being in that environment. I know Spencer can relate to what I'm talking about. Just
Mhm.
whether you get hit with a bullet or not, just being in that environment and the probability of anything
Right.
happening the next second is something that you have no human reference point for unless been in it. And
Right.
so also some of the, and this is not a slight to the military or anybody that's ever served, but the reality is when you're in a combat unit, a lot of people anesthetize to numb yourself and become monster-like in the environment. So if today is your day for something to happen, you want to be numb enough so that you don't even feel it. That's the kind of unit that I was in. So
Mhm.
that's why that's why I first learned how to use substances. Up to that point, I had never done anything, but in that environment, I learned from some other guys that had been deployed before, and developed an addiction in that environment. And when I
Mhm.
came back out, I stayed in the military, but now I had this double whammy going on. I had a substance addiction, and I also
Mhm.
was being treated for mental illness. Well, they call it mental illness then, but it was depression and PTSD and all kinds of other stuff. They had me on
Mhm.
psychotropic medications for a while. I went through it. I thought I was going crazy, and but I stayed in the military and I changed. They allowed me to change my MOS. What your MOS is your job. So I got out of the combat unit and I went to a school where I was able to serve by using my head. So I went to the chemical school, and 9 months in the chemical school and learned nuclear, biological, chemical hazard, and became what we call an NBC NCO. And I did that for the rest of the couple of years that I stayed in the military, which was a lot more easier on me. My mind still worked, but I still
Mhm.
had issues from the experience. So I continued in counseling and here and there. Here's the thing: my superiors really didn't even know the severity of the addiction thing that I was dealing with because I didn't even know. People didn't even use the term addiction then. It was just, they would say you're shell shot or
Yeah.
you just got some issues that you have to deal with. And so I hid that for a long time and kind of suffered in silence and still was able to pull myself together and climb up the ranks and get promoted and all. But eventually, it just got to a point where I said, you know what, this is not for me anymore. I'm not getting better, and I don't even have the enthusiasm that I used to have for it. It's kind of like I wasn't me from the point
Mhm.
coming back home from that deployment. I was never me again. Uh,
Now,
and
excuse me,
so
let me interrupt
eventually,
you one quick second. How long were you in there in the military?
I was in for a total of 7 years.
Okay. Okay, you can
Yeah.
continue.
I was in for a total of 7 years. But again, because I hid that what I came to know eventually as addiction. I hid it for a long time, and here was the thing also in the kind of unit that I was in. You didn't let anybody. You didn't show any weaknesses, because
Right.
we were a unit that could be anywhere in the world in like 72 hours. So there was no time for you to show weaknesses. So if anything was going on inside of you, you just hid
Mhm.
it and you just dealt with it. Our term was suck it up and keep moving.
Right.
And that was the mentality that had me suffering internally. It wasn't
Mhm.
really until years later, because I was functional. I could still, perform my job, but then every now and then that thing would take a hold of me, and
Mhm.
so that's kind of how it went. But eventually, I made the decision to get out. It was time to either reenlist or ETS, which is an end of term service to get out. And I
Mhm.
opted to get out and went back home to New Jersey, and God, that's where all my family is, and
Mhm.
got a place and was just trying to integrate slowly back into quote unquote mainstream society. But now here it is. I still had all these issues going on.
That was my going
So
to
I
be my
started.
question. Yeah, that was going to be my. Sorry to interrupt, but that was going to be my question. Once you got out of the military, you didn't have that shell to kind of hide behind. You had to function out in the world. How was it? Was it the
Yeah.
same? Or was it more? I would think it would be more difficult.
It was definitely more difficult because I hadn't been a civilian in almost 8 years, 7+ years. And so here it
Mhm.
is. Now I'm back in mainstream society, but I got this mental thing going on. I got
Right.
this addiction thing inside of me, and I'm like, man, what in the world is going on? I thought I was losing my mind. And so I functioned as best as I could for a while with the help of the VA. And
Mhm.
again, I was hiding everything from my parents. My mindset was I don't want to bring whatever craziness I'm dealing with. I don't have a label for it, but I definitely don't
Mhm.
want to bring it back to my parents and and put this burden on them because right now I'm pretty unpredictable. Anything can happen. I don't even
Right.
know me right now.
Mhm.
So I kind of functioned as best as possible in that realm for a while, and that but the addiction got worse and worse and worse, and eventually I ended up homeless. I ended up homeless in my hometown. I mean, I had family all around with homes that I could go to, but again, I didn't want to bring what I was dealing with to them,
Right.
so I kind of
Mhm.
used the military tactics that they taught me to live off the land, and I became kind of nomadic and just functioned in that dysfunction. That was my life. I thought that I was going to end up that way. I thought I was going to end up
Right.
When
early
did you
20.
recognize that you
Yes.
needed help
Uh,
after felt like you hit rock bottom?
I mean, I knew that I needed help for a while, but again, because of
Allowing.
how I was, yeah, because I was how I was conditioned to not
Yeah.
show anybody my weaknesses. Um, I made the decision to not tell anybody what I was dealing with. But it wasn't until things progressed so much so where I was just going down altogether, and I realized that this was something beyond me. Like if it was something intellectual, I'd have been able to figure out. But this was a deeper issue than I had the power to deal with, and that's when I said I really got to tell somebody about what's going on with me.
Okay, now let me
So
interrupt you really quick, and I'm gonna move on to Sylvester,
yeah,
then we're gonna go ahead and continue this the discussion part of it. Did you have? I can't recall if
sure.
you stated. Did you have children at the time, a wife, or anything at that time?
No, no, no. No, no, thank God I didn't. No, I had no
Okay.
children at that time. But now I have two sons and a daughter.
Okay.
My sons, yeah, my son, one son is 20, going to turn 23 on the 27th of this month. My other son, Elias, is 19, and he's a
Okay.
college freshman
Oh,
in New
great.
Jersey. And yeah, and my daughter
Awesome.
lives in the Alabama area. She's grown up too. She's in the whole hair salon and beauty, all that good stuff
Oh,
there.
okay.
So thank thank God that I didn't have children then.
I'm sure
You
that
know,
that made a difference, and that probably, if you had children at the time, it would have hopefully made a difference in how you would have approached things, maybe. Because sometimes people have
Mhm.
children and they still become addicted, or are addicted, so that doesn't
Mhm.
necessarily stop
yeah,
it from happening. But sometimes when you have this little person to focus on, it may at least give you a second look at, the decisions you're making. And I want to move on to really quick to Sylvester for you to give us some information on you. I know you are a veteran as well, and you've lived, as I stated. Can you give us a little bit about yourself?
Uh, Absolutely. First off, thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to share with your audience and just be a part of this platform. And I can definitely relate with a lot of things that Mike has just spoke about. For me, I'm originally from Columbus, Georgia. I grew up in a single parent home in a low income housing in a gang and drug infested neighborhood. Um,
Hmm.
Throughout my time of just being in that environment, of course, not having a present male figure in my life. I dealt with the hardship of identity issues. I dealt with emotional detachment. I dealt with just trying to find myself in general as a young man, and I struggled with that for a long period of time. And what propelled me to go into the military was just looking for a sense of purpose, just looking for a way out of my environment, and just try to start
Hmm.
something new. And along that journey and going through the military, of course, I ended up being deployed. I've been deployed three times to Iraq, one time to
Oh, wow.
Afghanistan, and it was my third deployment where I realized that I was a leader, honestly, because for a long period of time I just figured myself to be a follower that transitioned into a manager. But it was
Hmm.
my third deployment that made me realize that I've been blessed with the opportunity to lead others. And during that deployment, though, of course, you in a combat environment, your hazards are on 24/7. And just like Mike pointed out, you can't show your weakness. You got to suppress those things. And
Hmm.
one thing I can say about combat is that it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
care your mother, father, white, black, what your religion is. It doesn't
Yeah.
care. And to be in a hazardous environment for 365 days, that's over 1 million seconds of your life in a
Right.
hazardous environment, a life-threatening situation. You can be on a convoy one day and that got hit by small arm fire or hit by IED
Right.
and go out on that same road the following week. You can be sitting with one of your friends, we call them battle buddies in the military, and be
Mm-hmm.
going to their memorial service the following week. It's just
Wow.
like a constant battle on a daily basis. So you never know. Just like you said with the probability, when you come home, it's hard to decipher between possibility and probability. And just going through the motions of dealing with those things on that third deployment, I also was going through a severe divorce. I had been
Oh.
married 6 years at the time. I
Mm-hmm.
had a child, and I came back home to nothing. When I say
Okay.
nothing, I came back home to nothing. I had an empty home. The car was gone. My family was gone.
Mm-hmm.
The furniture in the house was gone. My bank account was drained. I came back home to nothing. And you think dealing with 365 days of being your life threatening situation, then coming
Right.
home to nothing, it
Mm-hmm.
just, I spiraled down. I resorted to drugs and alcohol to try and suppress this pain that I was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And during the time of me suppressing the pain, I also contemplated just taking my own life because I felt like I had nothing to live for. I had
Mm-hmm.
lost all sense of hope. And just going along that journey, I realized that just like you had spoke about with the three R's, that I had to recognize and really take ownership of where I was at, and
Right.
really take responsibility for everything that was going on around me. And
Mm-hmm.
then I also had to release the guilt. Had to release the guilt that I was dealing with. I had to release the fear of the unknown because I had a new change in my life, just dealing
Mm-hmm.
with being a single man. And then also I just had to really refocus my whole life. I had to really take the opportunity to guard my focus because there's so many things that can cloud your judgment and your emotions get so involved in the decisions that you make that it affects you along your journey as far as trying to get back integrated with life in general. And
Right.
then just removing myself from individuals that weren't no good for me. They say you got to separate in order to elevate, and that's
Mm-hmm.
what I did.
I agree.
Once I once I started pushing those people out my life, I noticed a change. So now I went from that to becoming an author, a first generation college graduate, a motivational speaker. I've been able to talk to
Congratulations.
high school,
Mm-hmm.
thank you, and young adults
Yes.
dealing with resilience and adversity in order to help them to become resilient leaders that triumph in life. Because I
Right.
went through the struggle and I never had nobody to point me in a direction. So I felt like God blessed me with this opportunity to give it back to somebody else. So that's a little bit about me and my story.
Now, do
That's
you?
great. Did you seek any counseling?
Absolutely. Towards the end of my journey, I spent 21 years in the military. So I just recently retired just last year, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That transition was pretty hard for me, but I did seek counseling roughly about my last 5 years in the military because it got to a point where I just couldn't hold anything in no more. The military, they frown upon you disclosing any information dealing with depression, honestly. So
Mm-hmm.
if you go in there, they see it as a sign of weakness,
All
just like
right.
Mike said. So I took the opportunity when I got to a point where I just couldn't suppress the pain anymore. I went down to behavioral health and
Mm-hmm.
told them everything that I had going on. And then they put me on medication like Zoloft and hydrocloxine, a
Mhm.
couple of other things, but that wasn't the way to go for me. I had to find a different way.
Right.
So I really chose to develop my faith uh, in order to release all those things that I was going through to help me better naturally, like I was supposed to be.
To be
And
right.
it's been a journey, it's been a process, but overall, I feel way much better after making that decision to transition from the military than I did prior to staying in the military.
Now, let me ask both of you all, do you think if you hit, I know that Mike actually decided to leave the military a little sooner, and as opposed to you, Sylvester, do you think, Sylvester, if you had gotten out of the military sooner, it would have maybe you would have probably bounced back from that situation sooner? And as well as you, Mike, do you feel that way as well?
So for me, I think I really don't think I would have. I think I still would have been in the position that I am now. I think everything happens for a reason. God's
Mm-hmm.
timing is the best timing. So I think it was just
Right.
part of the journey of where I am today.
Hmm.
Right. What about you,
Yeah,
Mike?
yeah, yeah. Ditto to what Brother Sylvester said. So I totally believe that now. I mean, I understand. I'm a lot older now than I was when I was a young guy. Went in at 18 and was still in my early 20s by the time I
Mm-hmm.
came out. So but I've learned a lot since then over the years, and one of the main things I've learned is who I really am. And I realize altogether when I look at the full picture of my life, I realize that God used everything is by God's permission, right? Nothing can happen to me unless God permits it. And that's not to say He causes it, but sometimes our own faulty decisions, right? We plan for life and then life happens.
Right.
And so
I
in the
agree.
military, I signed on to get out the hood like Sylvester, and I got combat with it. So life happened, and when life happens, we either one or two things can happen. And it's based on how we perceive things. It'll either paralyze our forward progress and short circuit our full potential, or
Mm-hmm.
like Brother Sylvester said, also, if our mindset sees it as not just something happening to me, but something that could be happening for me, then the pain can be converted into something powerful that can propel us into our full potential. And I firmly believe at this point in my life that that's what's happened. All that happened had to happen in order for me to be who I am today and actually
Mm-hmm.
have something of value to deposit into other people. So, like I'm like Marvin Sapp. I'm thankful for it all. The good, bad,
Exactly. Amen.
ugly, great.
Yeah.
And
And
you
that's
know
Thankful
right.
what?
for it all.
You know the old saying, the things in life don't kill you, make you stronger. And I'm sure
Hmm.
those things that happen, you are able to still extrapolate some things out of it that can help you move forward.
Absolutely.
Just in help you make different decisions now. When things come up, you can reference back to those times and things you don't want to go back to, and they help you make better decisions, or you slow down when making decisions. Now, let me ask both of you this: did you? I know you said in the military, both of you, that if you have any type of issue or anything like depression or going on, they see it as a sign of weakness. Did you see women going through that in the military as well, or is it pretty much more dominated on the male side, from your opinion?
No, I think it's for me personally, I think it's a combination of both, and I think it's very more difficult for females, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because I think they get it from both angles. Not only in garrison, what we call garrison is pretty much in a home station.
Mm-hmm.
So I think feel it in garrison and combat because they deal with also sexual harassment,
Hmm.
sexual assault,
Yeah.
and then also in a combat environment, they got to deal with life-threatening situations. So I think they feel it from both angles. So I think it's a greater impact for females, honestly.
Right. What about
Yeah,
you? You might. What do you think
I
about that?
totally. I agree with what Sylvester said. I mean, it's eerily interesting that how similar our journeys are.
I thought about
Um,
that too. I agree.
yeah, the women. I mean, women just unfortunately get it from all angles. And so it's so that they're not like he said. I mean, I don't want to just keep echoing his words, but it's true. If they're dealing with combat, they're dealing with the same psycho-social issues that we're dealing with. They're dealing with stress and depression and PTSD. It impacts them the
Right.
same way it impacts us. And then on top of that, they have to deal with the harassment from male knuckleheads who just don't know how to treat women. So and then that's 24/7. For us,
I
it's kind of
know.
in pockets, and we can segment and we can categorize how we choose to handle things. For them,
Hmm.
wherever they walk on the base, they're dealing with knucklehead stuff like that. So it's yeah, it's
And
it's it's pretty
I'm really
difficult.
glad we had this conversation and you all were in the military, because my oldest daughter that I had mentioned earlier that I lost a couple years ago,
Hmm.
when she was younger, she was in ROTC in school and she wanted to go into the military. And after all this happened, I said, man, I wish I had let her go in the military. She probably wouldn't have been here. She may not have met that fools she ran into, and because I never was an
Uh,
advocate for the military for women. I just felt like it just, I don't know, it's just something I could never put my arms around. But there are a lot of women in the military now. Things have obviously
Hmm.
changed a lot since she was
Yes.
18. And but now that you mentioned that, I'm like, maybe I didn't make a bad choice not really advocating for her to go in the military at that time. But yeah, I always was afraid for my daughters to go into the military because of those
Right.
very reasons, the sexual, but they deal with sexual harassment out in the workplace and in the world. You see all this on TV now, but in the military, it's just a whole different, in my opinion. I don't know a lot about the military, but the dynamics just
Right.
seem different. It's
Right.
more controlled. It's more, this is the outside world, and then this is our world. When you
Right.
Hmm.
think
Right. Right.
military,
Yes.
that's just
it
kind of
is
Right.
how,
pretty much.
you know.
Right.
So I don't know. My grandson wants to go in there now, and I'm like, oh, but he's a boy. I'm a little more lenient. My daughter had an older son. He's 17 now. He wants to go in the military, so I'm a little bit. I'm okay with that, as a man.
Right.
But women, I don't know. I've always been a little afraid.
Right. So for me, if I can caveat on what you said, is the military isn't a bad organization.
Right.
I think all branches are phenomenal as far as what they do is serving the country. But I
Mhm.
think it's the people that are in the
Right.
military that cause that rift as far as the image
Mhm.
that people have that have not served or timid about letting their son's daughter or even serving themselves. So
Yeah.
it's just the individual. Yeah,
Right.
it's just the individual them in the military, not the military itself.
I got you. I got you. So yeah. So that's a different perspective too. The different way of looking at it. Now, let me ask you all this. Being now that you move forward, you've dealt with homelessness, of course, divorce, financial struggles, and that type thing. Do
Mhm.
you think, what would you tell someone now that, how would you apply what you've learned to just everyday civilian life and for people who are going through different struggles?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. So, yeah, if I can link back to my story to answer that question,
Hmm.
uh, once I really began to seek help, um, I went into a place, a Christian place. It was kind of it was a rehabilitation center for men, but it was also Christian. So they offered Christianity and Christian counseling, and they also offered clinical counseling.
Hmm.
And it was there that God put somebody in my path that really helped me understand me, and really understood help me understand how God sees me even in the midst of my brokenness, and
Hmm.
also he
Mhm.
was able to see potential in me that I
Hmm.
didn't see because I was so bound. And that
Right.
man, he's gone to the other side of life now. But his name was Reverend Dr. Solomon J. Tividay. He was a guy from India, but he
Mm.
he had the best of both worlds. And when I thank God for my earthly father who's still alive at 83 years old, and I love him
Mm,
to
what a
no end.
blessing. Hmm.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, we talk
Absolutely.
every day.
Yes.
Yeah, but my dad, growing up in North Carolina at the time where they were plowing mules and all that kind of stuff in the 40s
Hmm.
and 50s, he just didn't have a certain level of know-how in terms of training to show me some of the things that this man showed me right at the time that I needed him. And there's one statement that
Right.
he made. I have to say this. I tell it wherever I go because it's true. This was the linchpin that kind of unlocked things for me. He looked me in the eyes one day in one of our counseling sessions, and he said to me, he said, "Mike, you have tremendous potential." He said, "But what's happened with you is that the abnormal in your life has now become comfortable." He said the
Hmm.
Mm.
abnormal has become normal to you, and
Hmm.
that's why you're stuck.
Right.
And he said, when the fear of hold on, no, when the pain of where you are in life is
Hmm.
more powerful than the fear of where you have the
Yeah.
potential to go, that's when you'll move.
Hmm.
And that's what he said to me.
That's
And
true.
when I sat back and thought about that, that right there changed the way that I saw things. He said, you have to realize that all that you made it through, the key word
Hmm.
is that you
Hmm.
made it through it. And now if you look at it from a different perspective, you can turn
Right.
you
Absolutely.
can turn pain into power, and it can push
Right.
you push you further. So I took that right there and started
Mhm.
studying scripture, started looking at clinical counseling, and he was my model. I wanted to be just like him. And I ended up, over the course of 13 years, I ended up going to school and knocking out 3 degrees, associates, bachelor's, and master's, all in counseling, theology, and counseling, combined degrees at different levels. And after that, I went right into doing counseling and running programs in New York and New Jersey for people
Mhm.
that were bound in different ways, just like I was, you know.
All
So,
right.
and that's what I've been doing for over 25 years now. So when you ask the question of how, what can we tell people who might be caught up right now, what I would tell them is that don't look at the pain in your life right now just from the perspective of it being pain. It could be, if your perception of it changes, it could turn into a blessing that could literally
Mhm.
propel you into your very meaning and purpose for living. You know,
Right. Right.
you
Yeah, I
might be
always say that
paralyzed.
too. Yeah, I always say God doesn't move all mountains. You have to ask Him for the strength to go around them. Because all things that are bad are not going to move. You have to ask God for the strength to make it around them. Sometimes you can't always go through them.
Right.
So what do you think, of
Absolutely.
Sylvester?
For me, I think Mike hit the nail on the head, man. Like your perception affects your performance,
Mhm.
anything that you do. But for me,
Yes.
I use something that's called I created this thing called the four canteens of life. So the four canteens of life deal with a spiritual canteen, a
Mhm.
physical canteen, a mental canteen, and also a social canteen. So
Mhm.
I always felt that your body is consistent of 60 or more percent of water, right?
Right.
So these canteens will continue to fuel you or keep you hydrated along your journey in life.
Mhm.
So sometimes we deal with the stress, sometimes we deal with the anxiety, sometimes we deal with the depression, and these
Mhm.
things can dehydrate you to the point that you don't want to move, that you
Mhm.
don't want to get out of bed, that you don't
Right.
want to perform in any kind of capacity.
That's
But when
right.
you have that mental canteen, because what you tune into, you turn into. So
Mhm.
some of the people that you hang out with, or some of the things that you listen to, will affect your mental capacity. So
Yes.
you need
Yes.
to make sure that you pay attention to that mental canteen and fill yourself with only positive things that's going to influence you to do better than where you are.
Yeah, you
And
know
then you
that
have that
old
physical
saying, "The
canteen.
birds of a feather flock together."
Yes.
Yes, 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 absolutely. So your physical
Stay with the
canteen,
positive.
like for me, I'm a physical guy. I like to work out. I
Mhm.
exercise on a daily basis. So I feel that this releases that happy chemical endorphins, and
Oh yeah.
also help you to think better and provide oxygen to your brain. So that physical, it doesn't have to be going out here and running 5 or 6 miles. It doesn't have to be going lifting weights at the gym. It can be a nice walk around your neighborhood. It can be like
Yes.
doing aerobics, something like that.
Mhm.
But either way it goes, do some type of physical activity in order
Right.
to clear your mind of all the BS that you might have been
And the
dealing with throughout the
negative.
day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes,
And to
absolutely.
yeah.
And then it's
Have you ever done yoga?
I tried yoga once, but it just wasn't my preference. So it's something that I haven't really got into. I'm
I'm
gonna just be honest with
I'm trying to get. I want to get into yoga. I want because I tried this breathing thing a few days ago, and it really helped me relax.
you. Right.
So I really want to
Yeah,
get into
I'm
some
not there
yoga.
yet.
But I'm sorry. Give me your fourth principle.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, and then we also have the spiritual canteen. I think Brother Mike hit it on the head. He
Mhm.
seeks spiritual counseling, and now he's in a position where he's able to provide that same spiritual counseling. And you don't
Mhm.
have to be a Christian. You can be Buddha, Islamic, whatever it might be, Muslim.
Mhm.
But you can always do meditation in order
Mhm.
to get you in that spiritual concept of where you need to be in order to clear your mind. But then also you have that social canteen. Everybody needs
Absolutely.
somebody that they can reach out and talk to whenever they're going through a tough time.
I
A
Yeah.
close
agree.
friend, loved one, family member,
They
mother,
go my best
father,
friend.
whoever it might be. Look,
Absolutely.
so that spirit, I mean, that social canteen is needed. So, but when you have
Right.
all four of these canteens,
Mhm.
you're able to repel a lot of
Yeah.
the torment or the hardship that you go through in life. So,
Mhm.
this is what I have used along my journey of transitioning from the military and integrating back into civilian life and being where I am today.
Exactly. I feel like in life things that control you mentally controls you physically, emotionally. If something has you mentally bound, you don't want to eat, you can't go to work and do your job, you just kind of you don't halfway want to get up and get moving because mentally you're just kind of bound. So I always try to stay in control I always try to teach my children, and I try to go by stay in control of things mentally, because I feel like stress and all of those things, they cause a lot of issues in the body. That's just the way I believe. So I try not to
I believe that it does.
I try not to
Truly
over
does.
stress. And I try to think you're going to go through stress. That's just life. But you have
Absolutely.
to minimize and try to
Right. Yes.
maximize, the positive in your life. I think that's important,
Exactly.
you know.
Yes.
So,
Stress is one of the biggest killers in this world.
Say that once more for me.
Stress is one of the biggest killers in this
Oh,
world
yeah,
that people
absolutely.
don't even recognize. It's an unaddressed health issue that people don't really put in perspective in order to try and focus on those areas. But stress is a big killer in life.
I absolutely agree.
And it's a silent killer.
Yes, exactly.
Do not keep it to yourself. You